No matter how many we play or own, or which ones that we like best, every gamer that I know has at least one genre or more of games that they can never seem to enjoy. And regardless of how many times we try, we can never find those games that satisfy us or understand why some games are so appealing to our friends. Well, you're not alone, as I too have more than a few types of games that I never want to play, with probably the most obvious being games that deal specifically with auctions, bidding, stocks, and especially route building, all mechanisms that never seem to hit the mark. So I'm here today to answer this simple question. What in the world would compel me to spend my time making a video about a game that has all the characteristics that I dislike most about gaming? Well, then stick around, because Pan Am might not be what you think it is. Okay, so let me start with this. About 2 weeks ago, we received 3 upcoming releases from Funko Games and design studio Prospero Hall. And to be completely honest, when I opened the box, Pan Am was by far the least interesting game of the bunch. I mean, I was initially comparing it here to both Godzilla and Back to the Future, right? But after playing all 3 of the games now, there's only one that I've played more than once. And that's Pan Am. And I've played it 6 times now. So there's definitely something here that's kept my attention, and I know what that is. But before I get there, let me first tell you just a little bit more about the game. Pan Am is a 2 to 4 player competitive board game that has you managing your own smaller airline during the golden age of Pan Am. And for those of you who might be too young to remember or might just not be totally aware, this was the company that was widely known for being the world's first truly global commercial airline. And over the course of the game's 7 rounds, players are going to compete against one another to claim the most lucrative travel routes on the board, which in turn increases their income and their airline's financial growth. Now, in order to do all this, players are going to attempt to secure the necessary actions that will fuel that process, all of which are tied to 5 specific locations on the board, but can really be broken down into these simple buckets. A, winning the right to construct your airports on the various cities on the map. B, gaining the correct combination of cards that give you the proper landing rights for your planes. C, building a larger and improved fleet of planes that grant you access to more financially profitable travel paths. And most importantly, D, completing as many of these routes between the cities as possible so that you can increase your income and ultimately be able to purchase the most stock in the Pan Am airline by the end of that 7th and final round. Because at the end of the game, only the player having the most amount of Pan Am stock can win. The truly interesting thing here is the way in which all of these simple goals are mechanically linked together within the game. And I'd argue that it's probably the main reason why I've been enjoying this group of mechanisms that I would typically otherwise dislike. Okay, so here's the real answer to my original question. Why am I covering this game? So despite the stocks, the routes, and the bidding that are all present here in some degree, more than anything else, Pan Am is really just a worker placement game at heart, and does an exceptional job at hiding those other mechanisms behind a very clever and really fun system. You see, in each round, in turn order, players will need to place one of their engineers onto the game board, effectively placing their bid for the right to take that location's actions, with most of the locations in the game providing players with the ability to outspend or outbid previously placed engineers, effectively removing them from the board to be placed again on a later turn. Once all the players' engineers have been placed, locations will then resolve in alphabetical order A through E, with the winning bidder either spending cash in hand according to the cost below their engineer, or far worse, having to sell some of their Pan Am stock back to the company in order to pay for the cost of that location's action. The exception to this rule occurs on 2 of the game's locations at the bottom of the game board, the routes and directive spaces, both of which allow each engineer that is placed there to take its action according to the order in which they were placed, being left to right. So in these cases, the timing of when you placed your engineer determines your ability to take those actions before the other players at the table. Each location, of course, provides unique abilities for the players to carry out, with the majority of the locations only being resolved by that one player who won the right to take that particular action. And I have to say, despite there really only being 5 distinct worker placement locations on the board, those limited number of locations never at all feel stifling or restrictive, and quite honestly, they make the game better for it by forcing players into constant indirect confrontation to secure them. And it's here that players will continually weigh their options, choosing whether to keep the cash that they have on hand in order to buy stocks earlier in the game at potentially cheaper prices, or instead do they spend that money to gain access to a location that may pay even greater dividends in the future. In the end, it all feels really, really balanced and demands players to always be engaged with the decisions that are being made at the table by other players, but also challenging them to make some really, really tough choices on their own. And I should probably point out that, like most games with auction mechanisms, bidding can feel ruthless, especially for those players who are playing the game for their first time or aren't in a position to financially compete for the locations that they need most. So know that going into the game. There are times when you just can't do what you want, especially when someone locks up that one specific location that you needed to complete in order to progress your plan. But it's also here that the game really shines brightest, because it's this tug of war between the players that creates a constant amount of friction that makes the game so fun to play. And in some games, this conflict can feel more annoying than rewarding, especially if the game carries a heavier and more complex set of rules that you're constantly fighting with as well. Pan Am, however, isn't that game. There is an underlying simplicity here that makes it one of those rare games that is incredibly accessible to all different experience levels, but also complex enough in its design to make it just as appealing to more enthusiast gamers like myself. But probably the most exciting discovery for me while playing was just how subtle the game was able to handle the inevitable yet slightly unpredictable way by which Pan Am itself expands its own footprint from its headquarters in Miami to other parts of the world by claiming their own permanent travel routes over the course of the game. In short, at the end of each round, a specific number of dice will be rolled as determined by the event card that is revealed at the start of each round. Each roll of the dice will in turn determine the direction or directions by which Pan Am will extend their network of hubs throughout the world, following specifically labeled printed pathways through the countries of South America, Asia, and Europe. Now at first, this expansion phase felt like nothing more than a cool little gimmick that was tacked on in order to pay tribute to the game's theme, and marked the company's growth as a global airline. But after just a single play, the importance of Pan Am's expansion became increasingly more clear as a true gameplay mechanism that players needed to be conscious of at all times. That's because two things occur here. One, it presents a constant threat to all of the players at the table by blocking specific routes on the board when Pan Am expands. Yet on the flip side, two, it also presents a brand new set of opportunities, allowing players to position their own routes directly in the path of Pan Am's potential lanes of growth, in hopes that they might sell those same routes back to Pan Am for a profit. And although this is such a simple concept when I break it down like that, the strategies that are layered behind this create an even wider selection of choices that you now have to consider every single turn. And this is really what I love most about this game: its ability to always remain simple at its core, yet continually deliver a healthy amount of choices that players must weigh each and every turn. But possibly even more important is that Pan Am is one of those rare games that keeps players engaged at every single moment by the simple way in which it structures its gameplay, putting the game's pacing and tension directly into the hands of the players themselves. So have you had a chance to play Pan Am yet? Do you agree or disagree with my review? Well, now's your chance to sound off in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching MVM. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this video, please consider dinging the bell below. That's going to notify you of all the new videos that are uploaded to our channel. Give us a big ol' thumbs up, subscribe, and as always, you consider watching all of our other videos on the channel, one of which is right here to my left.